Yo, yo, I bet. So, I'm gonna be doing a Mr. Nightmare stream? No, I haven't streamed in a while, right? It's like October or something. But, yeah, can you hear me? Alright, nice, nice. And we're gonna start with this video right here. Now, sadly, we have to listen to the audio since I don't have a face cam on the laptop. So, yeah, let's just get to it. Indeed.
Ages ago, when I was a boy, one of my favorite things to do would be to have sleepovers with my friends, especially my friend Joe. Joe had the coolest house layout. It was big and it had this huge basement with a pool table, air hockey table, and the entire basement looped around in a big circle. And we'd often ride his scooters around the loop in the basement while on our sugar rushes after hours of playing video games and eating junk food. The best part was his parents could never hear us down there, as they slept all the way upstairs. I'll never forget the night that my mom dropped me off at Joe's house after dinner. It was the night before a holiday, so we didn't have school the next day. Joe and I went straight to the basement and started playing one of his new video games on his PlayStation 1, when suddenly the door to the laundry room in the back creaked open. We paused the game and turned around to look, and yes, the door was now cracked open. I told Joe to go check it out. He said it's fine, it happens sometimes. To be honest though, sometimes at night, alone in his basement, Joe and I would get spooked. I told him to go shut the door because something about having that door open leading into a big pitch black laundry room was uncomfortable. I think he agreed because he got up to close it. After a while of playing video games, I started riding Joe's bike around the loop of the basement, which honestly was a lot more fun than it sounds. But then something else happened. There was a noise, almost like the sound of a laundry machine
Can you
door
hear it?
being banged or closed. It came from the laundry room again, obviously. This time Joe and I ran up the stairs freaked out, and Joe called his dad to come check the laundry room. His dad opened the door to the laundry room. Had a quick
Dude, I'm
5-second
high key
look,
kind
and
of
calmly
scared
said
of this
there's no
Joe
one
guy
in
right
there.
here.
So he went back upstairs to bed, and Joe and I continued to hang out for another hour or two. Then it came time to go to sleep. There were two couches down there, one in front of the TV, and then another towards the back of the basement by the bar. I slept on the couch towards the back of the basement. I didn't sleep long though. I woke up and it was still pitch black in the basement. No light shining through the small basement windows. It was still the middle of the night. I rubbed my eyes and sat up after getting this weird feeling of being watched.
I don't know.
Joe? I said. Just checking if
Joe?
he was awake. After saying his name, I heard and saw something moving in the darkness to the laundry room. And then the door creaked shut. I jumped off the couch to wake up Joe, but when I got to his couch, he wasn't there. That's when I became wise to what was going on. Joe was trying to scare me. I tiptoed to the door of the laundry room. I figured I would reverse it on him and scare him instead. I put my hand on the doorknob, and after a little mental build-up, I yanked the door open and went inside screaming. I turned on the light to the room, but Joe wasn't in there. Where could he be hiding? In that moment, I was beyond confused. I knew he had to be in the room. Then I noticed something through the glass of the dryer machine. I walked over to it and knelt down.
He kind of scared.
Someone was in the dryer machine, crunched up and like a ball. You know how dryer machine doors usually have the sort of tinted glass that's hard to see through? While I knew there was a person in there, it took me a few seconds to catch on. The person that was in the dryer machine looking back at me was not Joe. It was some grown man. I started screaming and ran all the way upstairs to Joe's parents' room.
No way.
Everyone in the house came out from their bedrooms in response, including Joe. Joe apparently was having a hard time falling asleep on the couch, so he went upstairs to his bedroom. I yelled there was someone hiding in the dryer machine. As Joe's
Like a
dad started
dummy?
his way storming to the basement, somebody ran through the living room and out the front door. Joe's mom let out a scream as his dad ran outside in his slippers to try to catch the man. Of course, being that he was only in
Guessing it's
slippers,
Joe's
he
father.
didn't have a
Not gonna
chance.
lie.
When he came back, Joe's mom had already called the cops. When the cops came, they asked me if there was anything specific that I could make out about the man.
Yep.
All I could say was that he was wearing dark clothes. Joe and I slept in his room. I slept on the floor with a blanket, and we kept the door locked. We took a break from the sleepovers for a while after that.
Bruh. So what happened to Joe?
This happened quite some time ago. In fact, it happened back in July 2013. It was my 13th birthday party, and my friends and I had been to Manchester for the day, before heading back to my house for a sleepover. A couple of them had stayed over before, but some hadn't, so I wanted to make a good impression. We all decided to sleep downstairs that night, as there wasn't enough room in my bedroom. We gathered our sleeping bags on the living room floor, watched cheesy rom-coms, and ate junk food until around 1 a.m. So we decided to hit the sack after our third movie. We turned off the lights with the exception of one, as although we didn't like to admit it then, we were a little afraid of the dark. It's a common thing to lie awake and chat at a sleepover after you say you're going to sleep. We were in the middle of whispering to each other who we thought our celebrity lookalikes were, when we heard it. A loud knock on our window cut through our conversation. "What was that?" said Emma, one of my friends.
Same.
"It's probably just my dad playing a prank or something," I said. Although this whole situation was kind of freaking me out, my dad had done this type of thing before, so I assumed it must have been him. We were beginning to calm
Joe's
down
back.
when suddenly another forceful knock came upon the window. This made some of my friends scream. I assured everyone that, like I said, it was probably just my dad being goofy. So I went over to the window to catch him red-handed. The curtains were closed, so I had to pull a section of them back to see who was outside. As I did, I came face to face with a man
I
who was
think
most certainly
Joe's
not
gonna
my
take a
dad.
huge L right here.
This man was bald with very thin eyebrows, and he had a missing tooth. He was sort of hunched over, and he looked at me with widened, glassy eyes. I immediately screamed and closed the curtain. At this point, my friends and I were pretty hysterical, and Emma began visibly shaking in fear. My parents were upstairs, so instinctively, I ran up to find them. As I got upstairs, my mom was talking to someone from her window. I didn't quite catch their conversation.
He does need the cheese
but she
balls.
told me what happened soon after. She said that she heard the knocking too, and when she looked out of her window to see who it was, the man looked up and asked her if she had seen a friend of his. I can't remember the name of the guy she said she was looking for, so we'll call him Paul. He kept asking for him over and over. "Have you seen Paul? Where is Paul? Has Paul been here?" Of course, my mom said she didn't know anyone named Paul. Eventually, she had to ask him to leave us alone, as he just kept wandering around our driveway. As the man finally left, I went back downstairs to calm my friends down. In retrospect, I feel bad for leaving them alone down there when some weird stranger was on our property. We all settled back down after that.
If Paul is Joe.
However, my mom's maternal instincts kicked in, so she wanted to make sure he was gone completely. She left briefly to go around the block in her car to make sure he wasn't still in the area. The street was dimly lit by impractical streetlights, so she had to put her high beams on. As she was driving, she saw someone dash across the middle of the road. Thinking it was just a kid, she just kept driving, until the man who was at our window appeared again. But this time, he practically jumped in front of my mom's car. My mom quickly slammed on the brakes, but before she could confront him, he disappeared off into the night. We never found out who that guy was, or what his true intentions were. And thankfully, we never saw him again. So much for wanting to make a good impression.
Bro, these ads right now.
My friend Jake slept over at my house one night when we were 12.
True.
Because of that, he may have possibly saved my life. It was a snowy weekend night. We watched a couple Christmas movies in my living room. My mom would bring us snacks and hot cocoa. She was always really nice to my friends when I had them over. My mom had to go to sleep kind of early because she worked. She and my dad had just recently divorced. By around 12, Jake and I went to my room, where we played Pokemon on our Game Boy Advances for a little. I don't remember much after that, besides falling asleep a little while later. I woke up in my bed to the room being extremely cold, and also feeling really thirsty. I went to the kitchen downstairs to get a cup of water. I noticed how much colder it had become upstairs as opposed to downstairs.
Yep.
I went back to my bed and tucked myself in. As I lay there trying to fall back asleep, I realized Jake was breathing weird, like a deeper, heavier breathing. It went on for some time, and after making a note of it in my head, it was all I could focus on. So I eventually threw a pillow at him. As he woke up, I told him to stop breathing so loud. He was confused as he looked up at me in my bed. He said, "What are you talking about?" I told him to just lower the volume of his breathing noises, as he was borderline snoring. Jake shifted his focus from me to down below my bed, and then he screamed. He crawled backwards until his back was pushing up against my dresser. I yelled, "What is it?"
Yeah, bro.
I hopped off my bed and looked under it where he was staring at. There was a middle-aged man with long hair laying underneath my bed, and he had his finger up to his lips saying, "Shh." It was a surreal sight, to say the least.
Okay, bet.
I felt like my heart was beating 200 beats per minute. The man whispered, "I know your mom. I'm here to see her." He started crawling out from under the bed. At that same moment, Jake and I ran from the room, screaming for my mom. We got to my mom's room and locked her bedroom door behind us. She was immediately distressed and confused by our screams. I barely had enough time to yell, "There's a man under my bed," before the doorknob to my mom's room started twisting and shaking. Then
Bro,
the
this
sounds
guy's
of the
just about
doorknob
to take
failing
a
to turn
huge
shifted to
L
heavy, aggressive
right here.
bangs on the door. My mom ran to her phone and called 911. She was on the phone already in tears, while also screaming at the man on the other side of the door to leave us alone. The man tried kicking the door in, but I think when he heard my mom on the phone, he left the house. We were all in shock. It took the police only a couple minutes to arrive, at which point the coast was clear. The biggest window in our house, which was the window to the upstairs spare bedroom, was lifted up completely, which explained the cool air entering the house upstairs. That also explained the man's point of entry. I told my mom that man claimed he knew her, but she had no idea who this man could have been. My mom dropped Jake off home, and she and I slept at my aunt and uncle's house for the rest of the night. The next day, my uncle installed a stronger lock on that upstairs window. This was like 16 years ago now. At this point, it's just a distant, haunting memory.
Next video. Stu K. Bruh. Appeared on my ad. Be what the
My friend
stream is.
I remember he had a Coke bottle in his hand and I was eating Wendy's when he said we should check out that creepy little cemetery across town. It was the most random idea ever, and I even told him that. Still, we had no school the next day, and I knew exactly which cemetery he was talking about of land with no sign. It probably dated back centuries, and it had this super creepy vibe to it because it was closed off by a gothic metal fence, and it was surrounded by woods on two sides, the road on one, and some old abandoned building on the other. Everything about it just gave scary vibes. It took a little persuading, but Sean managed to get me to want to check it out too. Ironically, it was a very cloudy, wettish kind of day, I guess conveniently adding to the mood.
True.
Sean pulled up his Honda to the side of the road. I told him to pull up more so it wasn't obvious. This was a low traffic road, so it would look kind of suspicious.
Honestly.
He pulled up a few hundred feet down the road, and we got out
And
and
you
cut
just said
through
a
the woods
racist
so
word.
that any potential passing traffic wouldn't see us entering the little cemetery. Hopping the fence in the
Bro,
woods
that
was
one guy
easy.
left.
It was maybe a 3 or 4 foot fence. Sean kind of took the lead on this since it was mainly his venture. He led us through the eerie little plot of land, and we looked at the archaic tombstones. They all seemed to be from... I know it sounds super dumb and cliche, but I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched constantly. I
Imagine
started
it.
looking around the
Big
surroundings.
L right there.
Still, with the feeling of being watched, I looked at the abandoned building next to the cemetery, at one of the windows. For a brief moment, I knew I saw someone standing at the window, even through the fog, smudge, and dirt on the glass. But they casually either ducked or walked away from the window. I told Sean we were being watched by someone in that building, and he turned to look at it as well. And he went to look for the entrance to it. I told him don't. I said we should just leave before we get in trouble. I stayed still by the tombstone he was looking at while he walked around the building. Then he found a way in. He called me over, but I stayed put. Then I heard some loud kind of crack. So I looked in that direction, and there was this older man, probably around 55. Gray hair, had on a black raincoat. I believe he was wearing jeans, and he had a mustache. But that's all I really got of him. Then he opened his mouth and screamed. Not just yelled. He screamed, "Get out." He screamed it so loud, I thought I saw birds fly away from being startled. And just like that, I started to feel lightheaded, and suddenly everything went dark. The next thing I remember was waking up to being dragged in the woods. I freaked out, thinking I was being kidnapped. But when I turned and got up, I saw it was just Sean. Sean was freaking out about something. He told me to follow him and run back to the car, so I didn't ask questions. As we ran through the woods, I heard something close behind me, and when I turned, I realized we were being followed by someone, so I ran even faster. We got to his Honda, and he basically put it in drive before the car even had a chance to fully start. When Sean was inside that abandoned building, he found a sigil of Baphomet painted on the wood floor, which is basically the sign of Satan. Around it were a bunch of freaky dolls with buttons for eyes.
Bruh.
He didn't get to see anything else in the building because he heard the old man scream at me outside. He came running to find me passed out on the floor, and he saw the old man slowly walking over to me. He started to drag me away from the old man and into the woods. He actually literally picked me up and threw me over the fence to get me out. I quickly came back to consciousness, and that's when we ran. I had only fainted one time in my life, and it was at that moment. I don't know why I fainted, but it happening at a graveyard with some kind of satanic ritual building right next to it makes it that much stranger.
God, there's an ad, dude.
Design isn't just for designers. It's for everyone.
True.
Canva is the free tool that makes designing anything.
It is beautiful.
My grandpa passed away a few years ago. I was always very close with him. This past July on his birthday, I paid him a visit at the cemetery. The cemetery he and my grandma chose to be buried at was about an hour drive from my apartment. My family lived closer, so they all went to his grave together. I had to go separately. It was a rainy, depressing day. There's nothing worse than visiting a cemetery on a gloomy day. The gatekeeper of the gate asked for the plot number. I gave it to him and he let me in. It's a pretty big cemetery, and I'd only been there a couple other times. Not as the driver, though, so I had a hard time finding it.
Nope.
I didn't see many other people, if any, at the cemetery that day. I'm sure the weather had something to do with it. Eventually, I found his stone and parked my car in the grass to the side. I put some flowers down under his stone, stood there for a while with my eyes closed and prayed. 5 rows of graves down, directly across from me, and he was looking right at me. I knew this man, though. It was my grandfather. No, it couldn't be. I rubbed my eyes, and he was gone. Did I just have a spiritual moment? Or were my eyes and mind playing tricks on me? Either way, I got the chills and I had goosebumps. I was quite honestly freaked out. I got back in my car, said, "Love you, Grandpa," and drove off. I felt like I had a headache on my way home. Not sure why. I was the only car on Prospect Road, a quiet road with dense forest on either
Bruh.
side. Commonly, there would be deer crossing here.
That's an L
My
right
car
there.
zipped down the road. I spotted someone on the side of the road coming up, which was odd. There were no sidewalks or a walking path on this road. I slowed down. Couldn't be. Looks like my grandpa again. When I realized this, my heart dropped 1,000 feet.
Bro, this dude's
I swerved the
grandpa.
car accidentally. I desperately tried to regain control and come to a stop. Luckily, my car didn't end up in a tree. Rather, just skidded out in the middle of the road until coming to a halt. I immediately looked back to where I saw him. I saw a deer on the side of the road, looking at my car. My heart was literally racing. I was terrified. I was not well, and I needed to get home. I made sure no cars were coming and got back in my lane. I focused on the road as best I could, given what I had just seen twice. I felt weird the rest of the day. Not sick, but something wasn't right with my head. I went to bed early after watching an episode of my show. I woke up at like 2 in the morning to my phone ringing. It was an unknown number. My heart started racing again.
Good
Any
spirit.
call at this hour couldn't be good news. I accepted the call and put the phone up to my ear. There was static on the other end. Finally, I said, "Hello?" More static. But what I thought I heard next, I
True.
couldn't believe. Just
2
briefly, for
a.m.
maybe half a second,
Bet.
I thought I heard my grandpa's voice over the static. I tried to say hello again. I was
Chill,
too shook.
bruh.
Every part of my body was actually shaking. Then the call cut to silence and ended. I called my phone provider the next day to trace the number. They couldn't. They didn't have enough data to trace it, apparently. Though I don't know if that was just bullshit or not. The events that took place that day and night were the scariest I've ever experienced. Do I think my dead grandpa was trying to contact me? I don't know. That sounds ridiculous. You'd think
Oh,
if you
his grandpa
experienced
is
something like this,
Joe.
you'd be so full of emotion and joy. But no, it still terrifies me. I really still don't know what to think or how to feel about it. Whether it sounds ridiculous or not, this happened. And I wonder almost every other night, was that really my grandpa on the phone?
Cause Joe
My friends and I were very
is in
stupid
my
when we were
house.
teenagers. I was like 17 or 18 when this happened.
True.
It was the month of October. I wanted to do something scary in the spirit of Halloween. There's a small cemetery about 10 minutes from where I live. And when I was drunk with a couple friends, I said we should sneak into it. I'll make up some names for my friends, Ryan and Mike. We were at Ryan's house. He didn't drink ever. So when I came up with the idea, he was the one to drive us to the cemetery. Mike and I were really the ones leading this. Ryan was just along for the ride. But then again, he hadn't been drinking. Ryan parked in some parking lot across the street. It was a ghost town because it was past midnight at that
Jeez,
point.
I just hit my whole table.
We made sure no one was around to see us as we hopped the fence into the cemetery. It wasn't exactly pitch black out, but it was slightly hard to see more than 10 feet in front of us. So we were all using our iPhone flashlights.
Yep, indeed.
There didn't appear to be any night security in the cemetery, so we kind of dispersed from each other.
Excuse me.
Ryan seemed to be following Mike more closely.
Excuse me.
You could still see where they were because of their flashlights. I went off a little further on my own, and I decided I'd start taking a creepy video. So I started recording with the light still on, of course. I recorded a bunch of old headstones and the general eerie vibe of the cemetery at night. I didn't see Mike and Ryan anymore, so I started to go look for them, still recording. I looked at my phone screen and froze. There was a woman, dressed in a white gown or dress, I want to say, with long, gray-looking hair. She was looking down at the ground. I looked up from my phone screen to look at her in person, but she was gone. I started to back away. I looked back at my phone screen,
True.
and there she was again. Only now she was looking into the camera, or rather, looking at me. I looked up from the phone again and could not see her once more, so I looked back down at the screen again. There I
Yeah,
could see her moving
bro,
closer
that was
to me.
like so loud.
I started to scream for Mike and Ryan as I sprinted away from that spot. I couldn't see their lights anywhere, and they weren't answering my screams. I had a feeling they were going to try to scare me, so I ran back for the fence of the cemetery to hop it and get out. I made it to Ryan's car and texted the two of them saying they need to get out of the cemetery now.
This
They
guy.
met me at the car minutes later. We all sat in the car, and I showed them the video I took. They had the same horrified looks on their faces I did. Now that I was actually watching the whole video, I could see the moment the woman slowly lifted her head from looking at the ground to looking at me, and then she starts to move towards me. We could only see her moving for like a second or two before I start screaming in the video and running away.
Bruh, 50
The way she
bitcoins.
was moving, I could see no leg movement. It almost seemed as though she were floating to me. I have that video saved on my old iPhone 4S, but the stupid thing won't turn on. It gets stuck at the Apple logo. I don't want to reset that phone until I can get that video off of it somehow. My friends firmly believe the woman in the video was a real, living person who also happened to be in the cemetery that night. Me having been the one to actually find her, and only being able to see her on my phone screen. Well, let's just say I was never a believer in the paranormal until that night.
No way. Next video. Here he goes. True. 'Cause Joe is in my house. Gonna grab my Glock 18 or whatever it's called. Grab a shotgun. I got a cap in. Disturbing police officer horror stories bed. Oh my god, just like Trump ads, bro. Oh my god, what is this? My laptop froze. Great. Alright, it's back.
My partner and I got a breaking and entering call late one Friday night. I'd never responded to a call like that before, but it sounded serious. A young woman was home alone and heard footsteps downstairs, but when she was on the 911 call, the call was cut before she could give her location in the house. We arrived to the home and entered through the front door, which was
Bruh,
left
school
unlocked,
shooting.
which later proved to be how the break-in occurred.
Lockdown
Both of us shouted
stories.
police with our guns drawn, expecting the suspect to be armed. We called out for Anna. That was the homeowner's name. Anna never called back to us. We knew she must have been scared and didn't want to give away her position to the intruder. We checked the whole first floor, which was small and quick. There didn't appear to be a basement. A door shutting upstairs drew my partner and I's attention. I led the way upstairs. All the doors had been shut, so I couldn't really tell which door I had just heard. I told my partner to check that one while I checked this one. I turned the doorknob and kicked the door open, immediately lifting my gun into the air. It was a dark, empty room. I heard breathing in this room, though. It sounded like a woman's breathing. I looked at the closet door, which was slit slightly open, and I saw half a face, mostly someone's eye, peeking through the opening. Resting assured it was Anna, I lowered my gun and said, "Anna, it's okay, you can come out." But she didn't, and the breathing quieted. Then my partner in the next room over called, "Jason, I found her." My feeling in that room suddenly went from at ease to ready to throw up.
Spooky.
I raised my gun again and yelled, "Come out of the closet." They did not obey, so I called my partner into the room. He turned on the light, and we opened the closet together to see this disheveled, drugged-out woman holding one of Anna's kitchen knives. With 2 guns pointed at her, she dropped the knife, and we brought her into the precinct. Thank God I was stationed in a safer area of town the next year. I haven't gotten any breaking and entering calls since then.
High key kinda spooky.
state trooper for 15 years. I've experienced my share of close calls and uncomfortable situations. This happened over a decade ago when I was still relatively new to the job. I was on night patrol on an interstate, about 2:30 a.m. I usually had my car parked near a bush to hide myself from view from oncoming speeding cars. But at this hour, I didn't really try to hide too much. I was moving my car and pulled into a gas station that sat on the side of the interstate. It was closed, not because it was late, but rather it was temporarily out of service. I noticed two cars parked in the lot next to each other. There was nothing immediately suspicious about this, but I kept my eye out just because strange things happen at this hour. I parked my car in a way that I could watch the interstate as well as these two parked cars. I realized that I didn't see anyone in either of those cars, though. Now this was quite suspicious. The station was closed and there were no workers here. I exited my car with my hands on my belt and approached the two cars. I tapped on the windows for the both of them. Nobody in either of them, as I suspected. I began to walk around the lot as the occasional car zipped down the interstate. I went up to the glass of the closed gas station and knocked on it. I turned around, dumbfounded. Whose cars were these? Just as I imagined they could be in the woods somewhere, I heard someone running from around the building and ask for my help. He was some young 20-something-year-old man, like me at the time. He said his car wouldn't start and needed help. Now, I told him right away that I was no mechanic and that he'd need to call a towing company, but he practically begged me to just check under the hood for a second. He ran to his driver's side and popped the hood. I looked under the hood with him, not really knowing what to look for because I wasn't much of a car guy at the time. I asked if his battery died, and I looked at him. I took note that he was looking around very oddly. He replied, I don't think so. I then looked at the car parked next to him. Whose car is that? I asked him. He said he didn't know. He simply parked there to see if there was a porta potty in the back or something. I was reading through this kid's bullshit. Something was up here. As I looked back at the guy from the two cars, I saw him looking back at something or someone.
True.
I turned.
Oh shit.
I unholstered my gun and aimed it at him. He dropped the knife and put his hands up. They both did. I immediately called for backup while keeping the two at gunpoint. I cuffed the one who was holding the knife and placed him in the back of my car, and then grabbed the second pair from my glove box and cuffed the second guy. When backup arrived, I went to the back of the gas station where the first guy had originally approached me from. What I found there still holds up to be the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen in all of my years as a trooper. Wrapped in garbage bags, cut up in 2 pieces each to fit in the bags. Along with them was also a shovel sitting on the concrete by the woods. The two were planning on burying the bodies somewhere in the woods off the interstate, and it seemed they were in a hurry. These two were a couple of the dumbest people I had ever interacted with, being that out of anywhere in the state, they chose to bury 2 bodies off an interstate behind a gas station. Going to sleep at night knowing you almost had your throat slit by somebody on the job messes with you. And I didn't get much sleep for a while. I'm a rookie cop currently working the night shift. I'm just a normal patrol officer conducting traffic stops and responding to basic 911 calls.
No way.
2 nights in a row last week, I was called to the same house. Dispatch had called me to check out the house as someone had dialed 911 and hung up. The
Bruh.
house was a couple miles from me, in my
Rookie
patrol
bacon
zone.
here.
I arrived to the house quickly and turned up the dirt driveway through the trees onto the property. The house was dark, no lights on, no cars, nothing. I parked my squad car on the far right side of the property and went to the front door, taking note that all the windows were properly shut. I knocked on the door and no answer. The door was also locked. For my immediate guess, the place was abandoned, for years by the looks of it. I called to dispatch that the place was abandoned and nobody was there. Then I left. The next night I was working the same shift, and around a similar time, this time, someone could be heard crying on the other end before the call ended. I was asked to check out the house again. This time I was a little further away, but still the drive wasn't too bad. I pulled up the dirt driveway again onto the property. And again, no lights, no cars.
But cock do
I
like
approached the front door again, and this time it was left cracked open. I knocked on the door while holding the door to prevent situation inside the house. I drove down the stairs as quietly as possible.
True.
I got to the bottom,
Streamline.
followed
There
the
we go.
dial
There we
tone
go.
to an old, early 2000s style landline speakerphone. The phone was off the hook, and it was playing the dial tone on speakerphone. I put the phone on the hook to silence the noise. It was almost as if it were planned to happen like this. As soon as the phone hit the hook, I heard a muzzled laughing type noise in a far corner of the basement. I turned around, and there was some guy standing opposite me in the basement, with his hand over his mouth, and he appeared to be laughing.
YTP,
It wasn't a genuine laugh. It was more like a sickly, mentally unstable laugh. The guy was holding something in his other hand. I couldn't see what it was at first. When he raised his hand up to his head, I realized he was holding a revolver.
Bruh.
I aimed my gun at him and yelled to drop the weapon. He paused as he had his revolver to his head, apparently about to pull the trigger. So I shot him in the arm twice, causing him to drop the gun.
Ooh.
He screamed in pain as I cuffed him and brought him upstairs. I requested a medical team at once. A second squad car pulled up, as did an ambulance a few minutes later. The scariest part about this for me was not that I had to shoot a man in the arm twice, but that I was mere seconds away from seeing a man spray his brains out onto the wall.
Dude, freaking ads, bruh.
Hello, everyone. I'm coming directly to you for ask a quick
Oh my
favor.
god, it's Joe Biden.
Will you add your name today and join our team? I've said from the outset of
Oh,
this
God.
election that we're in a battle.
My partner and I got a radio call of a welfare check, which is just a check on the welfare of a person. A woman's ex-boyfriend called because he received text from his ex stating that she wished it had never ended and that she could no longer go on without him. He gets to the place, knock, pound, etc. No answer. We call the number the ex provided and get an answer and hang up. So we hear it from the outside window and know she's in there. We say we're going to break the door down if she doesn't answer.
Yeah, guys.
We hear some slurred mess of speech. Door unlocks but doesn't open. We open the door to find a young woman, wet, naked, pale as hell, and swaying in one spot. Her hands bleeding. We call a rescue ambulance, and she's off to the hospital. Now to the creepy part. None of the lights would turn on, so we conduct a safety search and find candles lit in the bedroom and bathroom. On the walls were Bible scriptures written in her blood, in a tub of brown water, the water being mixed with old blood. I don't know how she survived, because that water was dark. She had been sitting in it for approximately 3 to 4 hours. Before getting transferred to a different county, I used to work as a police officer in Burlington, New Jersey. Burlington is not a safe place. They say that crime there is 88% higher than the rest of Jersey. Having worked there for a year, I got to learn that firsthand. Now, there would be a lot of break-ins, robberies, assaults, and after a while you'd get used to those calls.
I
Sometimes
drink that
pretty
Kool-Aid.
strange, unsettling calls, though. This was one of them. Most Burlington locals are familiar with the McNeil Mansion, a long abandoned mansion that sits right on the Delaware River. The home was constructed in 1894 to serve as a residence for Andrew H. McNeil, as well as his wife and 4 daughters. The house had been abandoned and left to decay since 1974 and is now owned by the county. Sometimes there would be kids trespassing on the property to check it out. Sometime past midnight, I was told over the radio by dispatch to investigate the property, as there was a report by a neighboring house that there were some people seen hopping the fence to the property. Upon entering the property, I noticed a light coming from inside one of the upstairs windows. Part of me inside died a little as I realized someone was in there, and it was my job to go in and get them out. I requested backup into my radio and stated I would be entering the mansion to pursue a trespasser. I scanned the outside of the house once more, looking for an entry point. Found one of the lower windows was smashed open and easily accessible, and that's how I made my way in. Right away, first thing I did was make my
When he comes
presence
to
as a
touch your
police
children,
officer
bro, I
known.
swear.
I was inside what appeared to once be the living room of the mansion, rubble covering the whole floor. I heard footsteps upstairs. I shouted again, expecting them to come down the stairs. They didn't, and then it was my job to come up. I went up the stairway and started walking around. There was no way to hide my steps with all the litter and rubble on the ground.
Cocaine.
Something fall in a nearby room. This is when the worry and fear really started to kick in. At this point, I had my hand on my gun holster, ready to react. Though let me tell you, having a gun doesn't make you feel invincible. I shouted again to try and draw out the trespassers from the room. You ever hear that dumb, overused quote, "I didn't sign up for this" in the movies? Well, I was pretty much feeling that exact way.
Me too.
I stepped into the room that I thought was where the noise had echoed from. It was some small, weird room with a bunch
Scary,
of
kinda
windows
scary.
with blurred glass film. There was a sliding closet door open about 3
Sure.
quarters, so they had to be in there. I took out my pepper spray and gave one more warning that I was a police officer before yanking the closet open fully.
You say wanking the closet
This
open?
made no sense. I looked around the room, and the windows. I looked to an outside deck, and there was someone standing behind one of them. I couldn't see anything about their features other
Sure.
than the outline of their body. Then I realized there were people at the other windows too. The way they were all looking at me through the window film. Such a ghostly appearance they gave, like a picture from a kid's horror novel. I found the door to that deck in an adjacent room. When I
Sure.
stepped out, the 3 figures standing at the windows were gone. I didn't see any other way off the deck besides the door I came out through. I saw the flashing lights of a police car through a bunch of trees, parked on the same lot as me. Another officer announced his and his partner's arrival to me over the radio. I met the officers outside the house and pointed up at the deck where I saw 3 people standing. They were creeped
Sure.
out as well when I described how they all just stood there at their own windows looking in. We searched the whole mansion together. I eventually came to a small room with a window on the first floor. And once again, something was outside this window. I had to step closer to figure out if it was a person's head or not. When I got too close, the object lowered below the window. I radioed the other officers to go outside with me. We looked around the whole property and didn't find anyone. We searched and moving on. The scariest part of this for me was definitely seeing 3 ghost-like silhouettes all
Ghost.
standing at their own of the 3 windows to that deck, looking inside at
Sure.
me.
That was it. That was the video. That was so short. What other video is there? Secret room side analysis. 3 more real Instagram horror stories. So like lockdown videos. The lockdown videos. I bet. This one? You've already seen it. Oh my god.
Attention, lockdown, lockdown. Lock the doors. Stay away from the windows.
Back in 2016, my school went into a lockdown. I was in my senior year, and it was the last week of school, so everything was kind of chill and laid back at that point. My friend, who we all used to call Bruce, was cutting class with me to smoke in my car in the senior parking lot. One of our friends, Mario, who was in the lunchroom, texted me to come chill with him, so Moose and I started walking back to the school. As we were about to enter through one of the discreet back doors of the school by the band and chorus rooms, Mario texted me saying the school was going into lockdown, and he was right. As we entered through the still unlocked back door, we noticed the red lockdown lights flashing in the tiny band hallway. We walked through the empty hall. This was the quieter section of the school with less foot traffic since we were far from the regular classrooms. I was texting Mario asking him what was going on, and if it was just a drill. Moose and I stood in the hallway waiting for an answer. My friend Mario texted back saying, "Dude, holy shit," and the 3 dots bubble, meaning he was typing, sat under his text for like 30 seconds. Then it went away. He didn't send a second text. I sent him 3 question marks. Moose and I didn't really know what to do. The main hallway lights were shut off, and all that lit up the halls were the backup lights and the red flashing lockdown lights. There were no teachers
True.
anywhere to tell us what to do, so we just chilled in the hallway. We tried opening the doors to the auditorium, but they had already been locked. Moose then tapped my shoulder and pointed down the hallway. All the way down, there was someone dressed in black fast approaching, like speed walking down the hall in our direction. At first it looked like a teacher, but as he got closer, we realized he was wearing some kind of white mask.
No way.
Moose and I started walking backwards instinctively in response to what we now perceived to be a threat. As he got even closer, we could confirm it was a mask on his face. And it was this horrifying, disgusting mask of some pale, rotting-like face. I'd never seen anything so creepy at any Halloween stores or anything. The man was now too close for comfort, and the way he was
Street man,
approaching
white
us was
tee.
obviously full of aggression. Moose and I turned and started running back towards the band room. We hoped the band teacher, Miss Bryant, would be in there to let us in. We got to the door, which was locked, and started pounding on it, but we didn't have time to wait. Moose and I split up to hide. I hid in one of the music department closets. I don't know where Moose went. I turned the light in the closet off and hid behind a big container. There was a big glass window in the door to the closet, and I could see into the hall thanks to the little light from the backup lights. I heard footsteps approaching from outside, so I ducked my head completely behind the container. I only looked
I
up
think I know
and
who
peeked
you're
out the
talking
window
about.
after the footsteps had stopped for a while, and I assumed it was clear, but it was not. The footsteps stopped because the man in the mask was standing at the door, looking in through the glass. I ducked back down, hoping he didn't see me, and then the closet door creaked open. It sounded as though he was trying to fiddle for the light switch, couldn't find it, then gave up. I heard footsteps quickly walk away,
Jason.
matching his speed walking pace from just before. I took out my phone to text Moose to see if he was alright, and I saw I had a long text from Mario. He explained that a student was stabbed in the bathroom by some masked man with a blade. Moose also texted me saying he's alright. He ran back outside to his car. I realized that was a good idea. I made sure the coast was clear and booked it for my car as well. I sat in my car in front of the school and watched as cop cars swarmed the place. At least 10 officers entered the building. Moose came to sit in my car with me, and we watched for over half an hour.
Spooky.
The school was let out early, with police escorting the kids out, of course. They never even found the masked man in the school. He likely escaped through one of the back doors. There were helicopters searching all day for the man. I'm pretty sure he was never found. I thank my lucky stars I didn't have a similar fate as that kid in the bathroom.
True.
I went to a very poor high school in a bad neighborhood. Because of that, we regularly had fire drills and lockdown drills in the case of something happening. During a lockdown, the teacher would turn off the lights and we'd all hide in a corner
Nah,
of the
I need to
classroom
check
without
something
saying
really quick.
anything.
I need to check something really quick. Sure. Alright, anyways.
It was a cold day in the third quarter of the school year. The windows were all shut, obviously, but still, the teacher had to stop mid-sentence because we could all hear some kind of shouting outside. Definitely some kind of commotion. The teacher went to the window,
Spooky
looked
time.
outside, then opened one of the windows, but the yelling seemed to stop by the time he did. At the same time, the dean started speaking over the loudspeaker and said we were going into a lockdown. The teacher rushed to shut the door and turn off the lights. Time seemed to move slow as we were all huddled in that corner. Screams started coming from the hallway. Not the screams of students, but deranged, angry screams from a grown man.
True.
Familiar to the screaming we briefly heard from outside. Someone dangerous was in the building, clearly. The school I went to didn't have security guards. It was too poor. So literally, in a case like this, we'd have to wait for police to arrive. The screams were then accompanied by bangs on a nearby door, another classroom. We could hear the screams of the kids in the room next to us. The banging stopped. The screaming grew closer, until it was right outside our door, and then bangs on our classroom door. A couple kids screamed and started to cry. The sick man on the other side of the door banged and banged. He started hitting the glass with his elbow, I think, as he screamed insane things that made no sense to us. Some of it being, "I'm sick of it, and just stop already." The sickening sound of the small, thin glass window of the door shattering made the reality of the situation sink in even worse. Of course, kids on either side of me were screaming and crying now. Me, I was just sitting there in total shock. The man on the other side of the door stuck his arm into the room through the thin window opening and tried unlocking the door. The teacher took that opportunity to grab a pair of scissors and literally stab the man's arm. The man cried out, banged on the door a few more times, even harder now, and started running down the halls, still crying in what was probably a mix of pain and anger.
True.
The lockdown was ended a few minutes after police arrived. There had to be at least 6 cop cars outside. And yes, the crazy sicko man was arrested and probably brought to a mental hospital.
Sicko man? Okay,
the man
buddy.
apparently wasn't armed, but he clearly came into the school with intentions of hurting people. Kids, mind you.
Tell me. This guy in the chat.
I went to a school in California. We always had a lockdown drill once a month. But only one time ever was it not a drill.
Hi, this is an interesting
in the
one.
cafeteria during my lunch period. The teacher, who was in charge of watching the lunchroom, announced over the microphone for everyone to be quiet. He announced to us that the school was going into lockdown and ordered us to be quiet.
Mayo.
I think he genuinely scared everyone by how serious and nervous he sounded, because everyone in the cafeteria looked genuinely shook and actually shut up. I looked around the disturbingly quiet cafeteria and could see everyone else was doing the same thing, taking nervous, curious glances at their friends and strangers at other tables. Then shit went down. A gunshot echoed from across the school.
What?
And that's when panic set in with everyone. Some kids ran for the exit door. The teacher in charge of the cafeteria yelled at everyone to hide under the tables as he locked the cafeteria doors and shut off the lights. I was sitting under the table with my friends, heart racing, feeling sick, knowing my life could be in danger. Every minute felt like an eternity.
Scary.
Just waiting for someone on the intercom to say it's all clear. Then, across the cafeteria, there was a sudden outroar of screams from students, mostly girls. The sound of tables and chairs being moved or falling over. My friends and I looked out from under the table.
Who doesn't
saw
love
a kid
cheese?
with a gun outside the locked door of the cafeteria. And I remember
Especially
hearing
with
gunshots. He was shooting at the glass door. The glass didn't shatter right away. I don't even know if it did at all. But the entire lunchroom cleared out. I ran in the direction of the front of the school, also the direction of my house.
Blue cheese,
I saw police cars already outside. I think they had just arrived at that point, but I didn't stick around to watch. I got home and told my parents. My dad turned on the news to see the shooting was already being talked about. Miraculously, only one girl was wounded, and the police somehow apprehended him without killing him. I'm sorry for anyone else who has to go through something like this. Fearing for your life that much is not something anyone should have to go through.
Alright, next. What's next? Quarantine stories. I agree with that statement. I don't know, you told me. Michael Myers, nice. And Let's put this video, I guess. Quarantine horror stories. Amber alert. No. See, I've been trying to do this since like 2 weeks from now, but like
My family and I have fled New York State to our
Siren
Massachusetts
Head
lake
bet.
house to avoid contact with other people. The lake, which I will not name for safety reasons, has a bunch of houses surrounding it, and in the summer months, it's full of boats and people barbecuing and drinking.
Siren
Right now, in
Head.
late March when I'm writing this, it's kind of a ghost town here, and it's weird seeing it like this here. Anyway, I wouldn't be here
True.
writing this if something didn't go wrong, right? My younger brothers, who I'll call Steve and Glenn, were out on the deck overlooking the lake with me. We were setting up the table for a game of beer pong, which we invited our dad to play with us so the teams would be even. The sky had reached that point after sunset where most of the sky was dark, but there was still that hint of orange on the horizon. The lake was calm and quiet, not a single boat, and all the neighboring houses seemed to be vacant. We were truly the only ones around still. Our deck has a fire pit, so we lit that for extra light as well as heat because it was chilly.
Tea party bet.
Four of us were playing a game of beer pong. In the middle of it, Glenn grabbed his phone and lowered the music to his portable speaker. He and Steve turned around to look over the deck to the grass below. My dad and I went over to see what they were looking at. Glenn said he heard something below us. He could see someone walk under the deck. The deck doesn't have a stairway leading
That
down.
game's
You have to go
reference,
inside
bruh.
and downstairs to get down there. So my dad and I went downstairs and out the back door onto the deck.
And this guy
My dad called out a bunch
sticking
of
his
times to
tongue down
confirm
the
this.
chat.
We went back upstairs. The thing is, Steve swore by it as well that he also
Oh,
heard someone
Daz
speaking from under
games.
the deck. Regardless, we cut the game of beer pong short and went inside, making
Fat
sure
guy
to
with the
lock the
beanie.
door. My mom and dad were up in their loft bedroom, while I was in the living
Time
room
to
playing
sleep. Sleep at
PlayStation.
11, dude.
That's when it started. Loud, aggressive bangs on the sliding door. Accompanied with the bangs was a man's shrieks and screams. Sounded like he was screaming for help.
I'm just
The curtain to
saying.
the door was shut, so I couldn't see who it was. But apparently everyone in the house heard him, because my brothers and
Take
parents
that
came
L
rushing to the
away,
living room.
bro.
My dad yanked the curtain open to find himself face to face with some red-in-the-face man banging his fist on the glass, begging to be let in. He was claiming he was hurt and needed help. My dad asked, "Where are you hurt?" He didn't answer that, though. He just kept repeating, "Let me in, I'm hurt." My dad then yelled to get out of here before we'd call the cops. He yanked the blinds shut and told us all to shut and lock our windows.
Guys,
if
it's
they
been
were
about like an hour now.
We all stayed in the living room together for a couple hours, just to be safe. We had a movie on in the background as we talked. Eventually, with no other uninvited visitors
Fab.
outside, we all split off into our respective rooms for the night. I was browsing YouTube videos in my bed when it happened.
Boys.
The crash of shattering glass so loud it made me jump out of my bed.
Excuse me?
My heart instantly started racing. I didn't know if I was the
Excuse
only
me?
one who
Oh,
heard it.
fake.
Picked up the phone and called my dad's cell. He
Gee.
picked up and whispered he heard it too. I had to stay in my room and lock the door. But the damn hinges.
So much lag.
I sat behind a big plastic bag and
There we
texted
go.
my brothers, who also heard the noise and each locked their doors. It was the most tense moment of my life in that closet. The bedroom door opened, and I could see through the strips in the closet door. Someone walked to my bed
Bet.
and sit at the edge of it. He then took off one of his shoes and started shaking it, as if to get something out of his shoe. He put his shoe back on, and his head actually turned to look at the closet door. I felt as though he was looking at me. There was just this silence for the longest time, until he finally spoke, saying, "I knew you were in there. I'm sure your family's entered through the freshly broken back door." And we left the room to meet them. The man who was sitting on my bed was no longer in the
I know,
house.
right? Lag.
He checked every closet, under every bed, every little
9
crevice
more
of the house.
minutes, bro.
Cops recommended we tape a bunch of garbage bags over the door and shut the curtain, and also that we stay awake for the night. My dad stayed in the living room the whole night. First thing in the morning, he ran to Home Depot to buy a glass pane to fix the door. We're still actively quarantining in this house a week later. I'll send updates if the man returns.
Want amazing looking eyes.
The hell
Try
is
them
this ad?
from the eye care experts at Bausch and Lomb. You'll find
That's that was more scary in the video.
I've been staying in my apartment in Jersey City during this coronavirus epidemic. My roommate has since gone home to Ohio to stay with her family during all this, so I've been in the apartment alone. I've been mostly just watching new movies and shows. I try not to go out too much because my city is pretty bad right now. A couple days ago, I was running extremely low on food, so I had to make a mandatory grocery
Right.
run. I went to the nearby Trader Joe's wearing a mask and gloves, which, including the insane line and limited stock, turned out to be a production. On my walk home in the dark, I realized the streets were even quieter than they were the last time I went shopping, just a week before. Suddenly, out from an alleyway, some guy wearing a mask and gloves approached me. He had a baby wrapped in a hoodie and small blanket in his hands. He seemed very sincere and asking me to let him take his son to my apartment real quick so he could change his diaper and feed him his food. He swore to me that he
Diaper,
was
what the
Chloe,
fuck?
and that he really needed this favor for just 5 minutes. That it was an emergency. Hearing the baby's little cries, and the fact that this man even had a child with him and just seemed sincere, the soft part of me agreed. I led him to my apartment building. It was only a short walk from there. We walked up the 3 stories to my apartment, and I let him inside, asking him to close the door behind him. I cleared a spot on the living room table for him to change his child's diaper and whatever. When I turned around, the man was like pacing around, more like snooping around, I guess. He went into my kitchen to do God knows what. I called over to him that I set up the table for him to use. He didn't answer. I started getting confused. I walked to the kitchen and saw him looking around suspiciously. And what else I saw confused me.
Snoopy?
The man was standing with what I thought was his child, held in only one hand. It took me a second to understand. It wasn't a child. It was just some baby doll wrapped up in a blanket. Assuming one of those realistic
Guy,
ones that
these
make
are
you
a
crying
fake
in motion
child,
movies. The man looked at me, pulled out a gun from his right pocket. That's where things went from 1 to 100 real quick. He looked at me with the gun aimed at me and said something along the lines of, "I'm gonna take what I want, and you're gonna stay in my sight." Of course, I had to say okay with a gun aimed at my head. I wondered if it could be a BB gun with a tip painted black, but even if it was, I doubted I could overpower him. I couldn't risk it. The man pulled out a big black bag from his backpack and filled it with valuables, including my wallet, some of my roommate's jewelry, kitchen valuables, my brother's Xbox, which he lent me, and my iPad. It was sickening to watch, but I was the most scared of him pulling the trigger of that gun. He filled his bag and threw the fake baby in it as well, and he left. I called the cops first thing. They came and helped me in contacting the building owner to see the CCTV footage from the halls. Of course, upon seeing the footage, it didn't help much. The man's face was covered by a mask, making it near impossible to even discover who he was. All I can do is urge everyone to be careful, not to trust anyone, and stay indoors until all of this is over.
Bro, I swear, if they place that like Joe Biden ad again, I swear I'm gonna lose it.
The past month, I've been quarantining in my apartment alone with minimal outside contact because of the virus. My apartment is the downstairs floor of a 2-family house. The upstairs occupant isn't the landlord, it's just another tenant. I'm actually decently acquainted with the guy. His name's Rico. To be honest, he's a bit odd though. Rico, because I've been quarantining. I do still have to wake up early in the morning though for work, which I report to on my laptop now. A week ago, Rico started making a lot of noise one night. Late night, actually. It was in bed. It was like past 12. I had to be up early. And all of a sudden, I just start hearing constant thumping noises coming from the upstairs level of the house. It sounded like Rico was stomping around in boots or something. I waited for it to hopefully end eventually. It just kept going on and on and on. Over 20 minutes of this stomping. I was so frustrated that I got up to knock on his door outside. I knocked a few times loud enough for him to hear. He never answered.
Yep.
I gave up and went back to my room though. Thankfully the noise had stopped. I wasn't sure if he heard my knocks and stopped because of that or what. Looking around my room, checked under my bed and in the closet. No one there. It's not like anyone could fit through that opening in the window, but someone actually went out of their way to open that. I'm terrified. I did a scope of the place with all the lights on. I could confirm there was nobody hiding inside, so I went back to bed with one eye open. Then the noises upstairs started again, thumping and stopping. I couldn't take this anymore. It almost sounded like he was hitting the floor with a hammer or something. I went up to his door again and pounded on it, yelling his name as well. Once again, no answer. I went back inside and grabbed my phone and dug deep for Rico's number. I found it and called him. He didn't pick up the first time or the second, but on the third time, he picked up sounding confused and like he had just been woken up. I said in a rather annoyed tone that he needed to stop making the constant noises. He asked what I'm talking about, and I explained the thumping noises.
Sure.
And he dropped the bomb
Oh,
and told
right.
me, Jared, I'm not in my apartment. I went home to stay with my family a week ago. Call the cops. It suddenly made a lot more sense, and I realized the noises had stopped ever since I went back to the door. I hung up before saying another word and dialed 911, not wasting a second. As I was on the phone talking to the police operator, I heard it clicking at my bedroom window. Someone was outside trying to lift open the window, which I had just locked earlier. I screamed as I realized it, and then yelled at the operator to hurry with the police. She said they were on their way and asked me to describe the man, but I couldn't. It was too dark. He seemed to hear my conversation, I would guess, and walked away from the window. 4 police officers showed up. I led them to the upstairs apartment where the door was unlocked. I walked in behind the officers. Not much searching needed to be done.
And the freaking laptop was again.
Long gray hair down to his shoulders. He was sitting on the couch, looking up at the ceiling, seemingly alone. When the officers approached him to arrest him, the man focused in on me, still laughing. He started to point at me, and that's when I had to leave because I was too freaked out. I waited until the man was in one of the police cars before talking to the officers again. I locked Rico's door, and the cops just told me to keep a good eye on the place for the time being. Rico came back the following day after his suspect was stolen. He's been staying upstairs since.
Anyways. Can I line turn the camera to the screen and you? Say what now? So yeah, I'll probably just stop it right here because like there's like way too much lag. Like turn it like that. Alright, good. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to stop the stream right here. So, like, there's so much lag, dude. And plus, it's like super late at night. So, yeah. I'll probably do this again tomorrow, but, like, yeah. See where it is till then. I bet. Bye.